Representative Rapp, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are here today, obviously, to consider House Bill 1948, a pro-life bill that has been a lot of work, a lot of meetings. And I'd like to read first just a small passage from the Abortion Control Act that was passed in the late 1980s. And it's the legislative intent of the Abortion Control Act. It is the intention of the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to protect hereby the life and health of the woman subject to abortion and to protect the life and health of the child subject to abortion. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1948 has two very important components. One is to roll back elective abortions, Mr. Speaker, from the current 6 months to 5 months. The other component of this piece of legislation prohibits the practice of dismemberment abortion. Mr. Speaker, we know that there are few issues that divide Americans more than abortion. We've been struggling with the question of conflicting and important rights between the mother and the life she carries even before the U.S. Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision in 1973. To my colleagues and the people of Pennsylvania, the words we heard back in 1973 that abortion would be rare, safe, and legal. Today, the latest numbers for abortion in our nation is over 59 million abortions. I would like you to consider today, when does life begin? Does it, as I am convinced, start at the moment of conception, or as others argue, in the minutes just after birth? What role does emerging science and medical technology hold in helping inform us as legislators and courts about when rights should result in legal protection or an update in law? In 1983, on the 10th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, President Ronald Reagan weighed in on the question of abortion and the conscience of our nation with the following conclusions. We cannot diminish the value of one category of human life, the unborn, without diminishing the value of human life. I have often said that when we talk about abortion, we are talking about two lives, the life of the mother and the life of the unborn. Why else do we call a pregnant woman a mother? What is the value of human life? The abortionist who reassembles the arms and legs of a tiny baby to make sure all its parts have been torn from its mother's body. The real question for him and for all of us is whether that tiny human life has a God-given right to be protected by the law, the same right we have. Science and technology helps us understand where we've been wrong and where corrections need to be made to outdated laws. Good science gives women, especially those in underserved communities, access to the highest quality care. And something is changing. When PBS airs a program like Twice Born, the miraculous journey of dramatic fetal surgeries at Children's Hospital right here in Pennsylvania, we know so much more about the science and life and how to save it. At this particular hospital, it's not politics or opinion, but medical science that guides the treatment of an unborn baby as a patient, capable of pain and entitled to the most sophisticated means of managing that pain. Right here in Pennsylvania, the members of the House of Representatives are being asked whether they'll follow science on the question of whether it's time to raise health and safety standards for women and their unborn babies. Now, more than 40 years after Roe versus Wade, we know it's time. Today, we're here to consider House Bill 1948, which would update a quarter-century-old law to reflect major advances in science, medical technology, and healthcare. It's legislation that should even bring alongside many who identify as pro-choice. This is a place for common ground. This legislation acknowledges what we've known from science and true stories, that the unborn child senses pain by 20 weeks gestation or 5 months. It recognizes that if advances in the medicine are allowing thousands of babies every year at 20 to 24 weeks to survive and thrive, our laws must change. Currently, Pennsylvania law allows elective abortions up to 6 months. This legislation rolls it back to 5, excluding risks to the mother's health. As a state committed to human rights, we must break with national policy and just 6 other countries in the world, including China and North Korea, and end elective late-term abortions after 20 weeks. Many countries, it's 12 weeks. In 2014, the Pennsylvania Department of Health reported 32,108 abortions in Pennsylvania. 1,553 were late term. When it comes to protecting the life of the mother, it is indisputable that the later in pregnancy an abortion occurs, the riskier it is for the mother and the more painful it is for the unborn child. Research has also revealed that a woman seeking abortion at 20 weeks or more is 91% more likely to die from an abortion than she was in the first trimester. These significant risks to maternal health should cause all of us concern, and several recent nationwide polls have demonstrated that public opinion is overwhelmingly in favor of prohibiting late-term abortions. In the words of William Wilberforce, who led the fight for more than 40 years to successfully outlaw England's barbaric participation in the human slave trade during the 18th century, he stated, and I quote, "The nature and all the circumstances of the trade are now laid open to us. We can no longer plead ignorance. We cannot evade it. We may spurn it, we may kick it out of the way, but we cannot turn aside as to avoid seeing it. For it is brought now so directly before our eyes that this House must decide and must justify to all the world and to its own conscience the grounds of our decision." And he further states, "Let not Parliament be the only body that is insensible to the principles of natural justice." And I believe that we can apply it to this General Assembly here. In the year 2016, when Pennsylvania hospitals are leading our nation in performing dramatic, life-preserving surgeries for the smallest of lives, we must finally end the inhumane practice of dismemberment abortions, which tears a living human being to pieces. In the United States Supreme Court, Justice Kennedy has described the gruesome nature of dismemberment abortion in terms that make it clear that it would be extremely painful. And I quote Justice Kennedy, "Friction causes the fetus to tear apart. For example, a leg may be ripped off the fetus as it is pulled through the cervix and out of the woman." And he stated in Stenberg versus Carhart, "The fetus in many cases dies just as a human adult or child would. It bleeds to death as it is torn limb from
Representative,
limb.
just please suspend, and I'd ask you to, you can repeat the quote. I just want you to suspend. Members, please. All of our debates are important, but members are entitled to be heard. Please take your seats. Members, please take your seats. If you have any conversations, please take them to the rooms off the floor of the chamber. We will be fair to all points of view on the issue, but Representative Rapp and all other members are entitled to be heard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative, just one moment. Members, I'm asking all the members in the back to please take your conversations off or to please take your seats. We have many members that want to speak on this legislation. They will all have an opportunity to be heard, and they all should be entitled. They are all entitled to be heard. Representative Rapp, please restate the quotation that I interrupted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The United States Supreme Court Justice Kennedy described the gruesome nature of dismemberment abortion in terms that make it clear it would be extremely painful. Friction causes the fetus to be torn apart. For example, a leg might be ripped off the fetus as it is pulled through the cervix and out of the woman. And in Stenberg versus Carhart, he had an even more graphic description. The fetus in many cases dies just as a human adult or child would. It bleeds to death as it is torn from limb. And in the words of a former abortionist, tearing a developed fetus apart limb by limb is an act of depravity that society should not permit. We can do better than this, Mr. Speaker. All Pennsylvania mothers and their unborn children deserve far better than this. Science agrees, and so does the majority of Americans. Passage of this legislation will succeed in righting this wrong. I request that you support House Bill 1948. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.